Welcome, everybody. Glad to see the people did the weather and got here tonight. So our agenda for tonight is going to be, you got to remember we're recording for the people who can't attend. If you're going to speak up, we'll have a microphone in the middle. When the presenter comes in, if you want to ask a question, move to the microphone and ask the question. Then we're going to go announcements, new members, have our raffle. We have some business items to go through, show and tell, and then we have a wonderful program by Gorilla Glue. So start off with we think we're going to have a tool swap. I don't think it's set yet, but we're looking at 618. Am I dying again? We also need another cameraman. We would like to have, 4 of them, so nobody has to do everything all the time. On show and tell, be mindful of the presenter and just tell us, the problems that you had, the type of wood, the length it took to do it, and then if there's any questions, please hold the questions till after the end of the meeting, and then you can go talk to the person for that. And this is just a trial, so we'll see how this works. I'm dying again. Upcoming events. My head ain't on right. So June 16th meeting, it's still kind of up in the air. I don't think we have a firm thing on that yet. In June, we're working on the tool swap. August, we're going to have a luthier, Joe Mendel. Is going to be the picnic and the art museum furniture tour. And then in September, Jay is going to be showing us his wonderful chest that he made. And then, Bill, is there anything else you want to talk about on classes and stuff coming up?
2 things.
Okay. Mike is over there.
On June 16th, we're going to have a guy in that builds wine cellars. I think that should be a pretty interesting presentation.
Free samples of wine?
The ones you bring, yeah. And in the fall, I want to have a presentation like we did with the CNC guys, where we talk about setting up a small shop. And I'm going to look for volunteers to participate in that. So if you're at all interested in that, just send an email to vicepresident@slwg.org, and I'll put you on the list, and we'll have some meetings to talk about how this is going to go once we get some more people involved. Thanks.
And the upcoming classes we're going to have on May 27th is going to be a lap box pre-build. Then on June 4th, we're going to do a lap box build. June 5th is going to be small gift projects. And July 31st ought to be a really interesting one. Adam's going to teach decorative wire, which he does some really neat work with those. Our community outreach people are Wayne Humphreys for the toys. Wayne is here tonight. I saw him walking around here someplace. There's Wayne. Tom Turney does our Home Sweet Home with the table builds right now, and Bill is our guy for the Rockwood School program. Bill just got done with one of them with a bunch of volunteers, and all of the kids that was in the classes up on the show and tell table have all wrote us thank you notes. So if you get a chance, go by there and look and see the notes. And now Tom is going to talk about the approval of the upcoming budget for this year.
Okay, last month we were supposed to present the budget as part of our annual business meeting, and unfortunately that slide didn't make it into the stack. We're also supposed to review the prior year financial results. So real quickly, this is the prior year. Our year ends March 31st. We had total revenues of $35,630, and that's the makeup of the revenues. Next slide. Who's got the?
Oh, you got it. They changed it.
Oh, thank you. Expense-wise, we had total expenses of $24,471. Expenses, you can see the headers here. These are our primary expenses. Shop operations, should be and is a big chunk of it. Classes, and then our community outreach. So with revenues of 35 and expenses at 24, we picked up 11,000 in cash. We began the year at 40,000 at 11. We ended the year at 51,706. Now, as many of you know, at some point we're going to need more space. We're up to about 290 members. We'll need more space, bigger shop, more equipment. So basically we're just building our reserve until somebody's rich uncle dies and gives us the bulk of it. So right now we're doing everything we should be doing as a guild, and membership's growing, so revenues are going up, cash is going up. Okay, as far as the budget, this is the approved budget for next year. Total revenues, we are expecting about 33,000. Total expenses, we're expecting 35. Now we got to remember, last year, the last couple of years, we haven't had a lot of expenses because of COVID. We have to pay room rental. We had paid in advance, and we had several credits we were carrying. We've expanded our community outreach program with our Christmas toy build. So there, and then the shop, we spent 8,000 this year. We're projecting we're going to spend about 11,000 in the shop. Some of that may go to a new roof. We don't know yet, but that's a $5,000 hit. So total revenues 33, expenses 35. So we may dig into our cash reserve, but I tend to doubt it. We'll probably end up making some money as we've done before. So does anybody have any questions about the prior year or the budget? Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so we got some changes coming up. We had some changes on the bylaws. So the first, you want me to read all of this, or can you guys read it?
I think we can read it.
Okay.
We have to vote on each one?
Yes. So if everybody agrees to the first one? Oh, go, okay.
Actually, we present them this month.
Yep.
They're voted on next month.
Okay, so then we'll send them out to the,
Right.
okay.
We just want to make everybody aware
Okay.
of
Okay.
what we're talking about as far as the changes go.
So we have a few articles here changing. We'll get it out in the email, in the newsletter for next month. But we've got,
Question,
yes.
why did we decide on 16? Why can't a member be younger?
Legal. Yep, it's a legal issue.
Even with the parents?
Yep.
Vote for these, or you want to do them online?
To vote is just going to be who shows up, and we'll just, we'll approve them like that. Right. And then we've got, that one's a long one. So you'll all be getting them, and we'll talk about that and vote on it next month. We're adding people to the advisory board. And changing on the outreach programs, and that's it.
Question,
Sure.
are those additions voting members?
Say that again?
Are these additions to the board voting members?
No. Yes.
Are all guild members going to be getting a copy of those changes?
Yes.
In writing?
Yes.
Good, because then they can take their time to peruse.
Correct.
them and so on.
Right.
And so, instead of just flashing them up.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Just be aware that they're going to be coming. Okay, we'll go to show and tell. If everybody who has show and tell, if you want to come up and line up over here. And I'll be first. So this is a ring box that I made for my wedding. It's made out of canary wood, which is really heavy, but really nice to work with. The bands are lace wood. I learned that this is blood wood. This is the hardest, crappiest wood to work with. It splinters between the layers. So you cut it like 1/4 inch thick, it splits. It was really weird, and I used it on I made my hinges, and it fell off of the back seat of the car, and I broke a hinge. I was like, psh. Brittle. It is. It's, oh. I thought it looked nice, and I thought it was going to be really good. And both of the hearts are inlaid. And I did that one and that one. So that was it. Thank you. Next.
Hello, I'm John Ferreira, and I have a few bowls I made. This one here was stabilized oak and sweet gum balls and pine cones with a epoxy finish on the outside where I spin the bowl at about 8 RPM so that it coats evenly. Epoxy with a lacquer finish. Pecan, spalted pecan with stabilized pine cone. And stabilized maple dyed red. Any questions? The dye, it's in the stabilizing fluid. I dyed it red with Alumilite resin dye. Okay.
Hello, I made this Moxon vise. It's made mostly from scrap material, leftover material, excuse me, I don't have scrap. The hardware comes from Taylor Tool Works out of Columbia, Missouri. And on the top, I cut in some dovetails to use these micro jig clamps. So in case I need to clamp down a board to do handwork. And it's my intention, excuse me here, I have an assembly table that's 30 inches high, so this raises it 6 inches. So I think that'll be a good working height for me, or also I can pull up a stool and do handwork on it. So I haven't really used it yet, but I plan on using it in the near future.
Larry Alvarez, and I did some abalone pins. Takes probably about 4 or 5 hours on each one because it takes quite a while to put each individual piece of abalone on the pin, then the turning of it since it's all aluminite, and you can't hog it off too quick because it will burst on you. Now that's it. Okay.
So, nothing very elegant, just a quick shooting board that I made this afternoon with the CNC. And I took the plane class last weekend with Mike, and kind of inspired me. So it's a good way to get a good straight true corner. Thank you.
I cut an octopus jigsaw puzzle. It's a little hard to see in the bag, but it won't hold together. It's out of a solid piece of pine, cut with a number 7 blade so that it's wide enough so the pieces will fit together.
I'm not sure how your feeling is. Seems to me, the more you spend on chisel, the more you are disappointed. The little you spend, then you feel very frustrated because it takes so much time to get the chisel prepared. So I started making my own chisel. This is a Dovetail Chisel. So I got rid of the handle because when you do very delicate work, you hold at the bottom anyway. You don't do this because this way gives you much better control. So the steel is some kind of generic Chinese-made high-speed steel. So the composition is very similar to A2 steel. You know, when I was working, I went to China a lot, so I acquired quite a few. So I made the chisels myself, and this is a tiny one and also with the steel I made marking knives, and also for cleaning, I made those 2 skilled chisels. That's it.
How'd you make it?
Oh, grinding, a lot of grinding. Yeah, I use my drill press to do the grinding.
Well, I'm a new member. My name's Ron Johnson, and Brian and I actually work together, and he's known me for years, and I like to do veneering. So he said, well, you know, new members like want to get into veneering, like, you know, how can they do that, right? So many years ago when I was young, I bought a book, right, back in the day before the internet. So this is a really good book, and they have one, a copy back there in the library.
Name and author.
Let's see, Veneering Simplified, and it's by Harry Jason Hobbs. So anyway, to get started in veneering, so this is a real simple box. I made this probably 30 years ago. It's a real simple box. It's rosewood, walnut, I don't know what the top of it I made out of inside here. I don't know what that is. So I went to Hobby Lobby and I bought one of those cheap little pine boxes that they had. They're unpainted, right? And I bought an X-Acto knife and some, don't get aggravated with me here, contact cement, okay, and a straight edge, all right? And of course I finished it, of course. But anyway, that's what I made this out of. So, you know, so you get the box, I don't know what they cost. They're probably $10 now at Hobby Lobby or whatever. You know, cheap hinges from the hardware store, nothing slick. The veneer is probably the most expensive part. And contact cement or spray adhesive nowadays, you know, you can get anywhere. Comment about contact cement, if you look at the top of this box, you can see the cracks in it. So it didn't hold up. It didn't hold up for 30 years. But, I mean, to get started and make something simple, and you can probably get into veneering for maybe 25 bucks, you know? So what the heck, give it a shot. So that's what this is about. And then for the folks who are more accomplished, this is something I made probably 20 years ago. It's called a gentleman's box. Back in the day when everybody carried a binder with them, the binder got thrown in here, and or you throw your keys in there or whatever, that kind of thing. It's veneered on the inside, banding, and walnut burl on the outside. It's book matched down the middle. And I will make a comment about the finish on the top of this. I pulled it out. It sits in one of the other rooms in the back room. And I didn't finish the top of this. It still needs to be, what do you call it, smoothed out or whatever. You still got divots in it from the veneer. But anyway, so that was it. So like I say, for 25 bucks, you too can get into veneering. Yes, sir.
You used contact cement on the first box. What cement did you use on the second?
Oh, no. This is regular old PVA glue, wood glue. It's calls and all that kind of happy stuff, you know. I got a cheap. You ever heard of I think it's called like Rocketeer or something like that. Quote me on the name, but they make a little hand vacuum press things, and they are great. You can buy them for like 80 bucks. And, you know, you can do a sheet, you know, I don't think you can do a half sheet of plywood, but you can do a fairly large sheet of plywood with it. And they're, you know, you don't have to buy the compressor or whatever that stuff is, the vacuum press and all that, and the hoses. You just got to put it in the bag, seal it up, and pump it up by hand. It's real simple.
They sell different size bags. They sell different size bags.
Yeah, they sell different size bags. You get small ones, big ones. Anyway, so anybody else? All right, guys, thanks.
Sorry, I forgot to say most important thing about chisel. My experience is, you know, it doesn't matter how much you pay. I bought a like $85 Japanese chisel, and I also bought Veritas chisel. I was very disappointed. The thing is, if you control the cutting angle, so you have a primary angle, you can use 25, 30. I mean, for mortise chisel, I would recommend 35 to 40 degrees. That makes huge difference. The durability of the cutting edge is much better. I forgot to say that.
Do we have any new members tonight?
Hi, everybody. I'm Corey Donner. I'm actually new member, as everybody knows. I joined the Woodworker Guild back in January. I've been seeing all of us actually online. Unfortunately, no thanks to work schedules, but it does happen. If you would say my woodworking experience is kind of vast. I do bowls, I do platters, I do duck calls, I do toys. I've actually started talking to Wayne, I guess, about a month and a half ago, I guess it was, about with the Toy Builders program. I did volunteer service as a firefighter for 14 years, and due to family reasons, I ended up stepping away from it. And I decided, you know, there's somewhere along the line that there's ways of getting out in the community, and I decided to take the woodworking along with it, and found us, and mind to tell you, so far I actually feel at home here. So hopefully I get a chance to learn something from each one of you, and hopefully something from myself as well. And that's about it. Thank you.
Yep. I think that's it for the new members. Let's go to raffle. Raffle tonight. We have a $50 gift card to Woodcraft. We have a $20 gift card to Rocklers, and a new pen.
All digits 776533.
All right.
Hey, wait a minute. That's a Turner, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you guys related?
I'd like an audit.
Hey, Tom, pick the next ticket, please.
It's
76543.
Yes!
Okay, John, you have to choose first.
Wait, what are the choices?
50, 20, or a pen?
You might
20.
want to wait on Don.
I'll take 20.
Take the 20.
All right, 776 481. 481.
Whoa! All right.
Glad to be in sunny St. Louis. I was originally scheduled to talk here in February. There was an ice storm that prevented that one. So between ice storms and tornadoes, I'm finally here. At least your baseball team, I'm from Cincinnati, is above 500. We're not even hitting a batting average.
You had the big red machine.
We do, but it's not this year. So my name is Chad Forestoffel. I'm a technical director of Gorilla Glue. I'm going to kind of give through a presentation of adhesives, why you use them, particularly in woods, but we'll get it outside the wood frame as well. So a little bit about myself. Originally from Cincinnati, I actually lived in a little town called Lebanon, Ohio, which is a little bit north of Cincinnati. It's known for two things. One is a train that basically you can ride that goes all year round. Has a track about 20 miles long. So a lot of people from Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky come to Lebanon. And the second thing is they have the largest horse-drawn carriage parade in the country. That occurs every year at Christmas. We get horses as far as from Kansas that come out every year. Hobbies, running my kids around. So my son's in football, my daughter's in competitive cheer. That's about what I get done. Love to kayak, do that with my older son. I have about 12 acres. Restored a 1915 Aero motor windmill. Have that up my property, 45 feet tall. I brought that from southern Kentucky all the way up to Ohio and put that up in my yard, basically. And then through fault, I don't know if everybody knows Shopsmith. Does everybody have one? My dad is kind of a collector. They're actually made in Dayton, Ohio. So he goes to sales and fixes them up. He has no more than 10 at a time. And somehow I've inherited about 5 of them. So I have them in my barn with all the tools. So that's basically what I work off of. My work history, started off my career at ARDL. That's actually Akron Rubber Development Laboratory. That's the largest independent rubber laboratory in the world. If you remember when the Challenger exploded back in '85, they actually determined that it was not, during the cold weather that those seals were not expanding. So they worked on that. They worked on, if you remember from 1998, the Firestone rollover situation with Ford Explorers. They were in litigation with that as well. I worked on that, actually, that project. From there, I went to 3Bond. 3Bond is an adhesive company, mainly doing work for Toyota, Honda, most of the Japanese companies on UV curable adhesives, a lot of thread lockers. From there, I moved to ITW. Spent my time at Illinois Toolworks, mainly in coatings for release agents. So release agents, anything from composite windmill blades to tires to composite wood. From there, I moved to Michelman. I was with Michelman 5 years working with adhesives in composite wood. So your OSBs, your plywoods, your particle board. Been to almost every wood mill manufacturer for composite wood in the world. I've been to China, Europe, Russia. So you name it, I've been there as far as in those mills. And then the last 6 years took me to Gorilla Glue. So Gorilla Glue is my first foray into more of the DIY market for adhesives, but it's been an enjoyable ride. Why learn about adhesives? I go to Home Depot and Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, a lot. Every time I go in there, there's always somebody that is bright-eyed staring at it. They don't know what to buy. They know they have the project to fix. They have no idea what adhesives. This is a set just from Home Depot. You can see there's tons of different adhesives. I let it go about 30, 60 seconds before I try to help them out. I might as well be working for Home Depot and Lowe's at this point. Adhesives can be confusing. Even the associates, we try to do a good job of training, particularly at Lowe's and Home Depot associates. We put together training programs that are separate from their programs to try to help associates for these projects. So please, if you're in those sections, ask the associate. They should have taken at least our training classes. But the more you know about adhesives, the better choices you can make for your jobs. And this is very important. No adhesive can do it all. We're talking about wood adhesives here, but adhesives are, because of the properties of the adhesives, there is always the best choice for your project to fix or repair. So why adhesives stick? Adhesive, what is it? It's a substance capable of holding materials together by surface attachment. No kidding. Adhesives have properties which allow for flow to wet the surfaces and then subsequently develop strength and cure. Good wetting in liquid state is essential. So when you want the adhesive actually to wet out, you don't want low surface energy substrate to your right. So for instance, if you're doing a project and you don't know if you actually have good wetting onto your surface, you can actually take a little bit of water, put it on the surface of your project where you're about ready to glue, and see if it makes a bead. If it makes a bead, I suggest sanding that area, because you want the actual material to wet out and penetrate into the surface. That's particularly why it's very hard to do the low surface energy substrates like plastics, polyethylene, polypropylene. They're very difficult to adhere to because of this low surface energy. Just does not, the adhesives don't like to wet out. Whether you're solvent-based, water-based, they just don't work very well. And adhesives bond by mechanical interlocking and chemical adhesion. They're both essential. We'll get into this a little bit later in another slide. Adhesive cure harden in different ways. So one's a release of solvent or water. That's essentially a PVA wood glue. You're drying the product. You're not actually curing the adhesive. Apply molten and then harden when cooled, hot melt. So that would be anything from like a glue stick, for instance, in your craft aisle. Chemical reactions. So there's moisture cure, there's heat cure, there's hardeners, activators like epoxies, and there's light cure, which is UV activated. And then there's combinations of those. So one good example is epoxies, which are activators. They're two-part epoxies. You put them together, but you can make it a lot faster by heat. So that's something to think about when you're using adhesives. Bond structure. Adhesion and cohesion are important for good bond. We do a lot of work on cohesive versus adhesive failures. So an adhesive failure is really the pink line. So that's the failure of the adhesive from the substrate. That's actually your worst issue. Your cohesive failure is your adhesive, actually the adhesive pulling apart itself. The best failure is obviously substrate failure. That's where the wood is literally like ripping off a chunk off. Glue considerations. Condition of the substrate. Cleanliness, surface prep, chemicals treatments, and moisture content. You know, if your wood, for instance, it has way too much moisture content, you're going to have clamp that a lot longer. Surface cleanliness, I suggest always wiping it off, especially if you have sawdust on there. Just wipe off the surface of the sample before you glue it. And then we talked about the water trick, just to see if you can get better wetting out, you'll get a better adhesion. Stress on the cured joint, you got to think about, is this thing you're going to be putting together, is there shrinkage, bending, different cuts types of wood, grain direction. We'll go into that a little bit later. Temperature and humidity before and after gluing. Typically we like to clamp 24 hours. You might be able to get away with clamping less and taking it off and just letting it dry additional. And potential for glue creep in wood joints. That's basically, you don't want all the glue to go into the joint and then starve the bond line. Assembly and cure conditions, that's important, again, mainly for dry time. Post-condition exposure, you know, is this project going to be inside, outside? Do you need the outside temperature? You might want to use a PVA type 1 glue. We'll go into that again a little bit later. And then picking that right glue for the job, that's hugely important. And then condition of the glue. A lot of times you'll see in a wood glue, for instance, they're separated. That's actually not a bad thing. It'll usually always mix back in. The issues you get with some of the wood glues is the freeze-thaw stability. So if you're keeping it, hopefully you're not keeping it in the garage where it gets cold, where you're getting constant cycling fluctuations. They'll withstand about 3 freeze-thaw cycles before it really starts to pull apart the emulsion. Bond line's hugely important. I tried to, on the right-hand folder is actually the cellular structure of a that looks like a southern yellow pine, for instance. It's a softwood. Softwoods have much bigger cellular structure, so you want to have penetration of that glue into the cells, particularly in the interface. So the interface is where when you cut the wood, you'll have a certain area where that's cut that you're going to have these cells that are starting to pull apart and collapse. That is where the glue actually bonds into the wood itself. And that's also where you get really good adhesion, is where you get that glue in these cells and you get that good bond line together. Hardwood's a little bit trickier because the cellular structure is so much finer, it's hard to get that interaction. So typically, in general, softwoods will adhere better than hardwoods. Hardwoods are more difficult, therefore you usually have to definitely clamp them and clamp them hard. Yeah, that's important. When you get into the adherent wood, this is the area that you're never going to get any interaction between the glue and the actual cells. I talked a little bit about surface prep. With surface prep, you can see here, this is a piece of, I don't know what I have in here, birch veneer, before, after, and then following sanding. You can see where you can do a real quick test with a bead of water. You're not going to get nearly as good adhesion here as you would with the bottom, just because it's wetting out. Same thing on metal. So on the metal, on the right-hand side, you can see where that was before we did any type of softness wash. There was obviously some type of oil, probably to prevent corrosion. When you wipe that away with a solvent wipe, then you can get good wetting on the left-hand side. Going into chemistry a little bit, I'm not going to go a whole lot in this. Polymers in general are long-chain repeating units of monomers. And the polymer backbone arrangement and side groups dictate adhesion and cure properties. Really, on the bottom there is actually the wood glue, PVA. You have a vinyl acetate with free radical precipitation to get your polyvinyl acetate. That is really your key to your wood glue. What makes that go is actually the catalyst. We'll get into that a little bit later too, but what's the difference between like a white glue and a yellow glue? Polymer chains and cross-linkings. The adhesive polymer chains can be unconnected, linear branched, or connected cross-linked. Cross-linked will always give you better adhesion properties than just interconnected linear. So I call this a spaghetti diagram. That's just a bunch of polymers that are kind of hold together. It's kind of like the fish line. You get your fish line all connected together. When you're on the right-hand side, you literally have cross-linked polymers that are together, so it's more thermosetting. Therefore, you can't also reverse it, but it gives you a better bond structure. So cross-linked chains that have more cohesive strength, it's really your water resistance with your epoxies, your gorilla glues, your methyl methacrylates, those type of glues. And cross-linking, not always positive as a temporary bond is desirable. Just what I was talking about. When you have a more cross-linked thermosetting, you can't reverse it. So for instance, in the type 1 wood glues, there's a lot more cross-linking. So once you make that, there's, for instance, with heat, you cannot get it apart. Once it's cross-linked, it's cross-linked. Chemical components, and typically in adhesives, so you have your polymers, one of your base things, then you have your solvent carrier, your water carrier, for instance, in wood glues. Fillers, rheology modifiers is basically just a thing that kind of makes it thicker. Plasticizers, if you add that in, it gives it some flexibility to the glue. Adhesion promoters gives you more adhesion. Wetting agents, that's to help the wetting out of it. In UV curables, you have some UV and oxidation inhibitors that also helps you with UV stability. So if you have a glue that is exposed to outdoor sunlight, that'll help with that. Catalyst, that's what drives the reaction once it's started. Colorants and preservatives. The preservatives are really just the biocides, and there's always a biocide in every one of your wood glues. Adhesives are classified in multiple ways. The chemical makeup, some people will say, hey, it's a superglue. Well, superglue is a cyanoacrylate, so they'll do it by that. The means of cure, heat, chemical, moisture, evaporation, hot melt, we kind of went through that a little bit. Solvent-based, water-based, 100% solids. Again, wood glues, most of them are water-based, but there are some solvent-based glues out there, like somebody mentioned contact cement. That's solvent-based glue. And then 100% solids, those are a lot of your construction adhesives. I don't know if everybody's used the cartridge with construction adhesives. We'll get those in a little bit on a later slide. But sometimes they classify it by application. I just mentioned construction adhesives. That's something that they would basically say in like a Home Depot or so, and that's how it would be classified. And then structural versus non-structural, which is structural is basically ability to support heavy loads. A lot of that has to do with your epoxies, your methyl methacrylates. Some people classify it as natural synthetic. You'll see in a later slide, most of the adhesives out there are actually synthetic. There's only a few natural ones. One particular one actually is in the wood glue industry. We'll get to that. And then consistencies, whether it's thicker or thinner. A lot of people classify some of those adhesives in that way. Common adhesive types at retail. This is the big slide. So synthetic glues are by far the majority that you'll find at Home Depot or Lowe's. Your wood glues is a PVA. Your school glue is a PVA. They are different. Polyurethane, Gorilla Glue, the original Gorilla Glue is a polyurethane. Super glue, which are cyanide epoxies, contact adhesives, solvent-based, construction adhesives, which contain polyurethane. They could be SBR, they could be SMP acrylic. A lot of those are a lot of 100% solids materials. Hot melts are all ethylene vinyl acetates, and then methyl methacrylates, which are not all that common in DIY. They're mainly used in industrial. For instance, the automotive industry to do bonding of metal to metal. Whether it's your hood, your side panel, those are all almost methyl methacrylates, but they're super strong. And then natural glues, based on plant starches or animal proteins. This is your hide glue. Does anybody ever use hide glue? Yeah. There is, I like hide glue. It's not very common. It's usually only sold in Rockler or Woodcraft. You can't even find it at Home Depot or Lowe's. We may change that. Wood glue, polyvinyl acetate. So it's a latex emulsion, PVA. Polymers basically suspended in water with a bunch of additives. They're typically 50%. Anywhere between 48 and 53% is typically all of them. Whether it's the Gorilla Glue one, whether it's tight bonds, they're all around that range. So that also means it's about 50% water, which has to basically be driven off during the cure. So they're ideal for wood, readily absorbs polar groups, interact with polar groups in the wood. So if you remember that diagram I did with the cellular structure, that's why wood glues are really ideal. The water is absorbed into the wood itself, and it really makes that good bond. There's different grades available. Assembly conditions, open time, clamp time. Most of the different grades are type 1, type 2, and type 3, which is the next slide we'll get into. And then I did put in here white glue versus yellow glue. Sometimes they refer to that. Yellow glues are wood glues. White glues are like your school glue. Wood glues are safe, simple to use. Water cleanup, you can wipe it off. Great strength of wood and inexpensive. The disadvantages, they're not as waterproof as your like polyurethane, for instance. The water does have to come off to cure, so that's your dry time. Your dry time is typically a little bit longer. When I say a little bit longer, it's probably overnight. Freeze-thaw stability, I mentioned that, where you can usually get about 3 freeze-thaw cycles, so it's basically frozen, then thawed out 3 times before really the emulsion starts to fall apart. So I highly recommend on any of the adhesives, don't stick them out in your garage. Make sure they're in a heated environment. I keep all my paints, adhesives, everything in my basement, and then take them up to my wood shop when I need them. And then low temperature bonding. So that's kind of a disadvantage where, because it is water, you can't use it outside in very cold weather just because of the water content.
Question?
Yeah.
Can white glue be used for wood?
It can. It's just not as strong. So I can give you some rough PSI numbers, so pounds per square inch, and we'll get into that here probably in the next couple slides. How's that? So there's 3 types of basically what we'll call wood glues. Type 1, type 2, type 3. Oh, yeah.
I had one question for you. What glue would you recommend for outdoor projects such as making outdoor furniture?
The type 1.
Repeat the question.
Type 1.
He was asking what type of glue would you use for outdoor projects. In the wood glue realm, I would use type 1, but there is a case where using original polyurethane, so the original Gorilla Glue, is actually even more of an advantage than type 1, just because of bond strength and in your water resistance.
Chad? Chad, would you repeat the question when people ask?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Step up to the microphone when you have a question, so we all can hear and people on the internet can hear.
That one?
Yes. What is the open time for type 1?
It's about 20 minutes.
If you're going to glue up something.
You got about 20 minutes of open time.
You have to be, and the type on 3 is longer than that.
Yes. Yeah, the Type Bond 3 does tend to be a little bit longer. We did a lot of research on that. We landed at about 20 minutes for that one. I know the Type Bond, I think we set it almost up to 40 minutes for that one. So you have a little bit more working time.
That's been my experience. And for Type 1 or Type Bond 3, which is stronger?
Actually, Type 1. So when we developed Wood Glue Ultimate, and by the way, I have samples, so everybody grab a sample of actually a couple of them. I have probably enough for everybody to have 2 of them, of the Wood Glue Ultimate. So when we developed Type 1, it launched about 1.5 years ago, we used Type Bond Type 3 as a control, because we know that's actually a very good adhesive. I've never knocked the Type Bond products. I think they're actually top-notch adhesives. When we developed our Type 1, we got about 15% more bond strength.
And what is the strongest single glue, metal to metal? Is it epoxy?
Methyl methacrylate, by far. And I have a slide on that. Yeah, metal to metal, we can get into that later. Methyl methacrylate is by far the strongest. So Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, it goes by Type 1 is the most water repellent, so it's considered waterproof. That's definitely your outdoor glue, your outdoor PVA wood glue. Your Type 1 or Type 2, we consider it more water resistant. It can be indoor or outdoor, but I really suggest it just to be indoor. And then a household glue, which is Type 3, is more of your white glue. So what's the difference of those? Mainly the Type 3 has no catalyst in it. So it's just polyvinyl acetate with no catalyst. So you're not getting any of that cross-linking. When you get into Type 2, it has catalyst, but at a pretty low level. And then Type 1, there's a few tricks to get to a Type 1. Number 1, you have a pretty good loading of catalyst. And number 2, you have actually wood flour in there, which acts as more of a, not necessarily a filler, more of a, something that kind of holds the bonds together itself. So you'll notice in both the Type Bond 3 and the Wood Glue Ultimate, you'll see some particulate in there. That is actually micronized wood flour. It's real fine. And that's actually in the formulation, about 3%, so it's not a whole lot, but it actually acts as kind of like a reinforcement agent. So if you think of fiberglass, it's kind of like putting those glass pieces in fiberglass to hold it, to make it stronger. Going, Type 3, 2, and 1 is kind of a little bit odd because it's the opposite nomenclature of Type Bonds. So Type Bond Type 3 is actually a Type 1. Their Type 2 is obviously the same, and then they have a Type 1, but I'm trying to think what they call it. They don't call it a Type 1, or excuse me, they have a Type 3, but I'm not sure what they call it. I think it's just their original, and it is a white glue. Any other questions? The polyurethane Gorilla Glue, does anybody use regular polyurethane on any of their projects? There is an advantage to doing that. So moisture-cured polyurethanes are polymers with some reactive end groups. So these are moisture-cured systems. It's a reaction of free ice and cyanide end groups with water, again, moisture-cured, but it does foam. So that's the big disadvantage is it does foam.
Some steam bending that I did, and that seemed to work out pretty well.
Yeah, it's super strong. I mean, it's very strong, but you have to clamp it hard because of that foam. And the foam occurs because the reaction itself is forming carbon dioxide. We are working currently on a project to minimize that foam, so hopefully we'll get that out in the marketplace in a few years. It'll be like a low foam Gorilla Glue. But that's something I know it's kind of a trade-off, but as far as outdoor weathering, this is the way to go. So back to your question on what to use outside, I would suggest like Gorilla Ultimate or Type Bond Type 3, but if you really want something to hold up and you can get away with the foaming and clamping, the Gorilla Polyurethane is the way to go. Good clamping is necessary, just mentioned that, and then it's great for hard or for bondwood outdoor applications. I'm also going to say for hardwoods as well, the original Gorilla Glue Polyurethane is great for hardwoods because the mechanism is different. The curing mechanism on this one is a moisture-cured system. It doesn't necessarily have to penetrate into the wood to work as well. Just another reason why you get really good strength. Talk about the positive and negative, versatile, strong, no solvents, waterproof. But it is sensitive to moisture. Again, this is one you probably don't want to be in a high humidity environment. We do see lower storage moisture conditions in like Louisiana in the summer, for instance. There is penetration through the bottle, especially after you open it. The foaming we talked about, you do have to clamp it. And strong, durable bonds make it difficult to remove. That's a positive and negative, depending on how you want to think about it. Gorilla polyurethane types, we actually have 3 types. One is actually not a polyurethane. It's actually an SMP. But the original, everybody knows that one, waterproof, high strength foaming. We have a dry as white one, so it's very similar in formulation. It's waterproof, has a medium strength. You do give away some of that strength by being a white in color when it dries, but it also will foam. And then we have a new, or fairly new, clear Gorilla Glue. That is actually an SMP, so that is a silane modified pure polyurethane. The big difference there is it's non-foaming, but it's water resistant, so it doesn't have, because of the chemistry, it doesn't have quite the water repellent or the waterproofness of as the original. But it does have very high strengths. So it has the same strength as the original, but not quite the water resistance. But it dries clear. Natural glues. So just talk about kind of like hide glue. Characteristics, they're usually mixed with water. They have already natural tack, and the big thing is they're reversible. So you can use heat, a heat gun, for instance, to take apart your joint if you want to change anything or move it later. Plant glues are out there. They're not very common. They're actually more common in Europe. Around here, the animal glues, we call it hide glue, fish glue, but it's really, it's a casein polymer. That's kind of what's in there. It's still used a lot in woodworking. Not really, people don't even know about it outside that because it's kind of going back in time. It's using that old technology. Available typically in granules. You can use it, some places you can actually buy it in powder and then mix it with water yourself. But it requires heat to use, and it's available in different gram strength. The big thing is it's reversible. So you can glue something up. It doesn't have the strength of your typical PVA glues, but again, you can heat it up and then take your product apart. Versatile and non-toxic, of course. It is not waterproof, so that's the biggest downfall. It would not be waterproof. It's usually required mixing and heating. Construction adhesives. So there's several chemistries out there. By far the latest and usually the higher price ones are SMPs. So those are your silane modified polyurethanes. But there are some lower ones like SBR solvent-based polyurethanes and acrylics. They're used more into subfloor, more construction projects. So most of these are considered more structural rather than using anything else. They're higher viscosity and they have to have caulk gun, obviously. And then certs you may see on packages, AFG01, ASTM 3498, and C557. AFG01 is actually a drywall spec, so if they claim that, it means for instance, if you were adhering your drywall to your studs, there's a test method that you have to pass for that. ASTM 3598 is actually a bond test, so that's a bond test pre and post soaking. So it has to hit certain levels. And then C557 is actually a pretty rigorous test where they're actually gluing up frozen lumber. So that one they're trying to mimic, for instance, somebody in the middle of Kansas in the middle of winter, a construction guy using the product when it's basically on frozen lumber. They're great for gap filling, so if you don't, if you need something to really fill a gap, you don't have a really tight bond, those are great for that. There's a lot of choices out there. We have 3 products I'll show you in a minute, but you do need a gun, and this category is really confusing. This one and the sealants, which I won't get into, that's where you see a lot of people just kind of standing there starry-eyed at this category because there's so many construction adhesives and there's twice as many sealants and nobody knows what to buy. We have 3, one being clear, it's pretty easy to use, and then we have a original heavy-duty one and an ultimate. The main 2 differences between the heavy-duty and the ultimate is we get a higher strength with the ultimate. We also get a higher durability. So they both do say waterproof, but you get actually a little bit more waterproof with the ultimate one. Higher strength, a little bit higher strength. The higher strength in the ultimate's about 20% more. You get more of a grab. When I say grab, that's when, for instance, if you're putting up a chair railing and you want to just put this adhesive on the back, put up your chair railing before you nail it. Your nail gun's on the other side of the room. You can put it up. It'll hold there while you grab your nail gun and then shoot it in. And then our clear product. The clear product's pretty unique, very high strength. So when you talk about PSI numbers, for instance, you know, heavy duty gets about 550 PSI. Ultimate gets around in the 750. And then very high strength with heavy duty, the max strength clear, that gets about 1800 PSI. So it gives you a frame of reference. It's really high. Going back to your question on strength. So most PVA wood glues, we're going back now. So most PVA wood glues, the type 2s, it's interesting because the type 2s and the type 1s, so the type 2 would be like original wood glue or type bond 2. And type bond 3, as well as our ultimate, actually don't give you a whole lot of bump in strength. It's mainly all about the water proofness. Typically, wood glues in general, you get about 2200 PSI, so it kind of gives you a frame of reference on maple. I should quote that, because that would be on maple. It's different on every different wood substrate. Epoxies. 2 components, resin and hardener. Not a whole lot used in wood, but sometimes they are, especially if you need to set a screw in it. You have a hole and you want to fill it. You actually want to set a screw in it. There's a wide variety of formulations for, you know, they change them for set speed, rheology, cured properties, color. There's just a ton of them on the marketplace. Typically, most of them are the 5-minute quick fixes, smaller jobs. Pot life, that kind of varies too. We just talked about 5 minutes. There's some of them are 20 minutes. Depends on how much pot life you're looking at. The big advantage of these, they're versatile. There's no solvents. They are water and chemical resistance. They're great for gap filling. And then they can have a long shelf life as long as they don't mix together. But they're intimidating for most DIYers. We actually have the #1 epoxy, it's in the middle there, on the market. But in all honesty, we sell a good amount, but it's not nearly as much as the other ones. 2-part epoxies in general in the marketplace are just kind of intimidating for most users. JB Weld is a big person in that space. They can't have an odor, but they are very hard too. So if you need a flexible glue, epoxy is not the way to go. Methyl methacrylates. We just talked about metal-to-metal bonding. 2-component resin and hardener. We have one called Gorilla Weld. 3 to 10 minute. You do have to mix it 1-to-1 ratio. The pot life varies. Ours is around 5-minute pot life on this product, so you have about 5 minutes of working time for that. It is black in color, but it's great for moldable gap filling. It's super great for metal-to-metal bonding. So that's why automotive suppliers always use methyl methacrylates. And ours dries black. There are a couple of them on the marketplace, but not a whole lot. This is actually one of my go-to adhesives, just because I know the strength of it. So you talk about PSI numbers, you know, wood glue's getting 2200 on maple. This will get like 4300. It doubles that. It's by far the strongest adhesive we make. It's versatile. It's great for gap filling. You can actually mold. It's so thick that you can actually mold it in different shapes. We actually made a air conditioning knob for a vehicle. We went to the junkyard and found this vehicle that was missing a knob, and we recreated one of the other knobs using this because we just molded it in place.
What is the open time for that?
About 5 minutes.
Okay.
It's pretty quick. You do have to mix it. The biggest downfall of this is it has a strong odor, and you'll notice it. So if you use this, if you can use it outdoor or in a large environment, use it, because even a little bit, it has a pretty strong odor. Usually when this is used in an industrial OEM, automotive plant, there's all this ventilation that they have around this. And it does have a shorter shelf life. So it does harden them, not particularly the hardener side, but the resin side will harden over time. So when they use this in industrial, for instance, they use it usually within a month. We found a way to kind of put it in a tube and allow it to last longer. That's great. This is also great for tapping as well. So if you needed to, like, for instance, get into, fill a hole and then you need to tap it and put a screw in it, it's great for that.
Can you freeze it to extend its shelf life?
Yeah,
Yes.
cold, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. In general, most of the adhesives, other than water-based adhesives,
are good.
If you keep cold, it lengthens your shelf life. Good question.
We had a question from an online viewer that asked, going back to the hide glue, if there was merit to the idea that It's also useful because it can adhere to itself, and you're used in restoration work where hide glue was originally used. Is that unique to hide glue, that restoration work and that glue?
Yes, because most of the restoration work requires a natural product. That's why they use the hide glue. And as you see from that slide, most of the adhesives out there are not natural. I know there was a push about 12 years ago. I know even Elmer's had a lot of natural-based adhesives. You can't even find them now. It was one of those things that the market just didn't support it. They actually called them Elmer's Naturals. And they were based off of kind of like the rice, what I talked about, is basically a rice starch.
And any merit to the idea that the hide glue adhering to itself, or is that, do the glues do that, or?
Yeah, when you heat it, it's going to become soft again, so that's where it's going to adhere to itself. I don't know, I honestly don't know if it would adhere to a fully cured system, if that was any better than like a PVA, for instance. But because you can soften it up, I would say there is probably. Is that one. So it's clear Gorilla Glue, would work well on plexiglass.
Okay.
Or the Max Strength Clear Construction Adhesive. They actually both have about the same strength properties. The big difference between the Max Strength Clear, it's really viscous. So if you're putting some plexiglass near some gap filling also, I don't know if you're sliding the plexiglass in some type of channel. If you are and you need some body in there where it won't run as much, then I would suggest getting some of the Max Strength Clear.
Max Strength, is that the brand name or the brand on it?
Yeah, it's called Max Strength Clear. It's really our only clear in a cartridge.
Okay, I was thinking more of a CA, but that
CAs work on plexiglass, but problem is, are you bonding it to anything else? That's where your CAs won't do as well.
That's the next question. And so I've got, the traditional white, I don't know what it is, plastic cutting board material my brother-in-law gave me, and I'm thinking about using that as an inlay and decorative part of a cutting board.
Okay.
What glue would work between that and wood?
I would go with one of those two.
Okay, I didn't really want to buy a
cartridge.
Cartridge. Is there one of the smaller?
Well, I mean, if you can get away with it being thinner, when I say thinner, it's pourable, then that one. This one's pourable, it just won't, if you're on a vertical surface, it'll definitely run down.
Okay.
The clear Gorilla Glue? Yeah, just clear Gorilla Glue. We're actually working right now on a clear Gorilla Glue gel, which is kind of an offset of this one, but it's not in it. It'll be in a small tube. We've had a lot of requests, hey, I like this glue, but I'm working on a vertical surface and it runs. So, we suggest, of course, in a cartridge, but people don't want to buy a whole cartridge, which I totally understand. So we're working on a smaller version, basically, of kind of Max Strength Clear for that. On the cutting board question, make sure that you roughen up that surface where you're going to adhere it to. You're going to have to do that probably with that cutting board, because my guess is it's either polyethylene or polypropylene. You want to get some physical attraction from the glue bond. So just take a piece of sandpaper or a filing knife and just kind of roughen it up. Went through methyl methacrylates, superglues, cyanoacrylates. Most people know what superglues are. The monomers react in presence of water. Again, they're moisture cured for form long, strong chains. Alkaline conditions accelerate the reaction. That's important for, you'll see some what they call plastic bonders out there. So it's a super glue and it has a little bit of a tube next to it. It's basically a two-part. They have a primer that goes on there. It's basically an alkaline material that you put on the surface, and it kind of accelerates that reaction. Question?
Yes. Is there a way to keep super glue usable after you've opened it and then put the cap back on?
Good question. No, buy another one.
I have bought them and opened them, and they were no good when I opened them because they've been sitting on the shelf.
Keep it in your refrigerator or your freezer. That extends the shelf life. That's number one.
Okay.
That does extend the shelf life. The other thing is just make sure you kind of wipe off the tip before you put that in there.
With what?
Just with a towel, paper towel. Okay. Just don't use water. Let's say that. Yeah, just use a towel. We do have, in our super glues, you'll notice if you ever turn both our bottles or our tubes, if you turn the cap upside down, it actually has a metal pin in there. That's kind of unique to us. That metal pin is actually to force metal pin into the hole, so it does keep it a little bit longer. But in general, this is another one. Keep it in your refrigerator or keep it in your freezer. It'll extend your shelf life. Hot and humid, they don't like. Without modifiers, cyanoacrylate are watery and brittle. We have tougheners, rheology modifiers. That's one thing that we do claim on our Gorilla Glues is impact tough. So why is that important? Because super glues are so hard and brittle. We put impact modifiers in ours in case you, like, let's say, for instance, fix a toy and the kid's gonna, beat it up and really push it into the wall. So it's gonna have some flexibility in there. You wanna have that flexibility to keep that toy together. And then for woodworking applications, contractors actually use a lot of super glue, surprisingly. I've seen this actually when I built my house. The carpenter surprisingly used it. So they put, like, for instance, the door frames together on the ground, and they'll tack it together with super glue, let it dry for 5 minutes. They'll put the whole thing up, put it on the door, and then tack it in with your nail gun. We sell a lot in the industrial market for that reason. So a lot of contractors are using super glues, but most of our purchases are for that for our normal DIY. Positives are fast, versatile, strong bond, clear, but they are not waterproof. So don't suggest a super glue to be outside at all. The chemistry just does not allow water resistance at all. Going on, clear epoxy, that kind of goes back, I mentioned we have the #1 epoxy in set, that's this one here. Our big claim to fame on our epoxy is it doesn't yellow as much over time. Epoxies, just because of the chemistry, tend to yellow, particularly with UV. Ours is actually really clear. So we can kind of claim it indoor, outdoor, because we're putting some UV inhibitors in there. But again, it's good for gaps and cracks and high strength. Contact adhesives. They're elastomeric polymer particles dispersed in a liquid-based solvent or emulsified with water. Most of them are solvent-based. They're usually applied with a brush or gel. Partially dry, pressure applied for instant bond. Cured contact cement is usually compliant and not considered permanent. They're really a low adhesive properties. The big advantage of that is it's flexible. So it has decent adhesion, good heat resistance, and it's super quick because it's solvent-based. The solvent flashes off quick. But that also is a negative because it is solvent-based. It doesn't really have poor cohesive strength, so it doesn't really have that great bond. And then it's poor for solvent and water resistance as well. Where would you use, like for instance, our contact adhesive Clear Grip, where you're really looking into flexibility. So these glues are really flexible. They're good at like repairing shoes, for instance. So the sole of your shoe, you can repair that, where you're going to have a lot of flexibility when you're walking on it constantly over and over. They're also great for fabric. So in the woodworking, the way I envision it, if you're putting like felt on something, like inside a box or something like that, if you really want a good adhesion to the felt itself, that's where a Clear Grip would work really well. I know we did a lot of work on putting patches on like jeans, for instance, and then running it 50 times through a wash cycle, so 50 wash cycles, and that patch is still on there. It's really good just for that flexibility on that part of it. But if you want a structural adhesive, that's not. Remove by heat, fairly quick and easy. The disadvantages, again, low bond strength. Remove by heat could be an advantage, could be a disadvantage. Must have hot glue, a gun applicator, so you have to have a hot glue gun. And then, I don't know if everybody's seen the stores, so we launched this in December of 2021. It was really not fully in stores, in most stores like Walmart, until February of this year. But we do have a wood filler now. It's a water-based wood filler. I could do a whole presentation on wood fillers. So wood fillers, there's two types of wood fillers. I don't know if, there's a solvent-based wood filler. That's the DAP plastic wood. That comes in a little can that's inverted. I don't know if everybody's used that. Great product. The problem is it's a one-time use. They tried to help shelf life by inverting the can and putting a label, so you're forced to actually turn it upside down, basically, for the lid, but it still doesn't really hold up. We went with a water-based one. We do get really strong, durable repairs. I have a bunch of slides I go into on a lot of outdoor weathering testing that we've done with this. It actually holds up really well outside, completely uncoated. It's easy to spread, shrink and crack resistance, It'll anchor nails and screws, sandable, interior, exterior. Water resistant, we don't claim waterproof. We definitely claim water resistant on this. It is moldable and it's in a square tub. Interesting on the square tubs, I'll go on that a little bit. So in square tubs and with wood filler and spackling, if you ever use that, DAP uses their round ones. Everybody else is using the square ones. We like the square ones because you can take your putty knife and you can use it as a trowel tray. That's really the reason why we went with the, they're a little bit more expensive, but we went with the square tub. And then safe handling and storage, I always put this in here. You know, adhesives should be handled carefully. With wood glue, you know, they're pretty safe. You can wipe it off with your finger. Safety glasses and gloves, always a good idea. It really depends. I've seen on the news where the Gorilla Glue lady did her hair. That was one. That was actually the contact spray adhesive that she used. That was not actually original Gorilla Glue. It was contact spray adhesive. Why she did that, I don't know. But again, should be in here. Keep away from pets and children. SDS is available, always on. Cleanup really depends on the adhesive type. You know, we talked about moisture cured systems. Most of your moisture cured systems don't use water to clean it up. Removal and cleanup usually easier before cure, of course. And then disposable safer with a cured adhesive. A lot of times you can just let it cure in a rag or something and then throw it away. Storage, most glues do have a limited shelf life. We talked about, you know, cold does usually help most adhesives. The ones that I would be concerned on is the water-based ones. So your school glue, your typical PVA wood glues, don't keep those in the cold. But most of the other ones will benefit, actually keep them in your refrigerator, for instance. Temperature and humidity, and it's because of that. It's not necessarily the refrigerator that's acting it or the freezer. It's because the humidity in your refrigerator or freezer is lower because of the cold air doesn't hold as much moisture. That's really the reason. So if you have a dry box without heat, that'd be ideal. We actually have half our warehouse is dehumidified for that exact purpose. We want to keep our adhesives as good as we can get before they're shipped to like the DC centers of Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, where we basically have no control after it leaves our facility. Bunch of references and then questions. Any other questions?
For PVA glue, is glue creep real, and if so, how can it be avoided?
Fill in the gaps prior to you putting the parts together. I mean, if you see a crack that you know that glue is going to creep into, you need to fill that crack as much as possible, or apply more glue. That'd be the other thing, is really use more glue, and then you'll probably have to wipe off the excess a little bit more. But for most projects that you're actually just gluing two bonds together, if you don't have an apparent, you know, something that actually the glue is not forced into, then you probably won't have an issue.
I do some pen making, and you have to glue a brass tube inside of the hole in the blank. There's a lot of discussion about super glue versus 5-minute epoxy. Which one is best? Opinions?
Super glue would be easier to do because you can do it real fine.
Mm-hmm.
There are some epoxies out there in the smaller syringe that actually have a static mixer on her. I think epoxy would give you a better bond, let's say that. But it's going to be a lot harder to utilize. That's kind of up to you. I think both of those will work is where I'm getting at.
And one comment, our last speaker was a piano refinisher,
Yeah.
okay? And I think he uses exclusively hide glue.
Yeah, interesting. To Home Depot and Lowe's to get it mainstream, because right now it's, like I said, it's only sold in your specialty woodworking stores like Rockler and Woodcraft. Yeah.
For PVA glues, doing something like a mortise and tenon, what would be your maximum and minimum gap between the pieces that will still allow the glue to reach its maximum capabilities?
Yeah, remember that the glue is 50% water.
Right.
So you're going to get 50% shrinkage.
Mhm.
That's the rule of thumb.
So I heard a long time ago that a minimum gap you want is about 5 thousandths, which in wood is
probably about right.
Yeah. So a really tight fit would be just as bad as a really loose fit in terms of the glue filling the gap.
Yeah, but it also depends on wood type too. So if it's a softwood, for instance, it's going to penetrate in there more, so you can get away with a tighter gap.
Mhm.
If you're on like you know, an oak, where basically you're not going to get any penetration in that glue, that's where you probably want a little bit of gap if you can get it, because that'll give you more strength. Okay. So I think there's more components to that question than just that.
That is true. That's why I asked it.
Yeah.
And the second question on particle boards. Since a lot of the particle board is already resin of some kind, what kind of glue would you use for particle boards?
Construction adhesives work great. There's a lot of glues that work on particle boards. So again, that's kind of my background. So particle board, most of the particle boards are going to MDI, which is polyurethane, which is actually the same as Gorilla Glue original. It's a polyurethane. There's not actually as much resin as you think in particle board. Particle board typically only has between 4 and 6% glue in the board.
Now, I have glued particle board back to back, and you can actually see the glue line on either side of the seam. But I was just curious if the PVA glue would not be the best for that application.
Are you roughing up the surface before you glue it?
No.
Okay.
It's the raw factory surface.
You might want to sand it first. They put what they call edge sealer on it. It's basically a wax emulsion that they put all the way around the board. The problem is it oversprays onto the surface of the board, and then do the water drop test to see if you get a bead on there. If you get a bead, definitely sand it. Okay. But I would still sand it. Wherever you're going to bond on that particle board, just do a light sand.
I've not had any failures yet.
Okay.
But I have.
That's just a trick that, just because I know in the industry that those wax, if you go through actually I have a whole other presentation. The boards go through this room and then they're doing a wax spray. It's like a mist. It gets everywhere.
It gets everywhere, okay.
The problem is then the wax gets on top of the board and you have literally a low surface energy surface on that board. Polyurethane glues are great for wood. The original Grow Glue, if you're going to bond OSB, particle board or MDI, that's definitely the one to go with.
The way to go with. Okay.
Yeah. Because that's what the board itself is actually adhered with.
Cool, thanks.
This is kind of what you said in the prior time, but just good old wood glue. Do you want to clamp those real tight, like you said, or you want to leave the
That's $1 million question.
Leave it loose so the glue can work, or you clamp it tight and squeeze all the glue out like some of the books?
Yeah, because there is if you do clamp it too tight, you will starve that bond line.
Right.
So you won't have enough glue in there. I don't like to clamp mine like super tight. I actually like to back it off. There is where you talk about 20-minute working time, where I'll clamp that down and I'll release it after 2 hours a little bit, so it gets that initial bond line, it gets that strength, and then I release it after 2 hours and let it sit overnight. But still having clamp pressure on it. That seems to give the most strength overnight. There's probably a lot of other factors that go into that too. Unfortunately, that's the $1 million question on clamping for certain.
Yeah, I know for tight bond glue, they have a series of numbers on the outside, and if you know how to decode them, it tells you when the glue was made. Does Gorilla have,
on the bottom of our bottles. I'm trying to think if those have it on there.
Yeah. Is it easy to read, or does it need
I don't
decoding?
know if it's a Jillian date. I'm going to have to look on those.
A Jillian date, you said?
Sometimes they're the Jillian date.
Okay.
You can
So
look
it's
up a
just the
Jillian code, a chart, and it'll actually tell you if it's a 3-digit code. But I'll have to look on.
Okay.
I'll have to look on there.
Sure. Thanks.
Does that have numbers on the bottom? Yes. What I don't know is which lot coding is on this one. 21 is the year, so you can get the year. Yeah, it says, then it has 315. So that's probably the Julian date of the 21. Yeah, so that would be a December 21. We use so many lot coding on so many different adhesives that I always have to look up our chart to find out what we, it could be the fill line when you get in there, because there's.
1733, so it's 5:30 in the afternoon.
We do that too. We have numbers for fill line, we have numbers for time stamp, so there's all kinds of numbers on there. I might be able to follow up with Bill on that exact question.
I should probably go, how long should I keep it before it's too old?
Our shelf life on that is 2 years, but I know wood glues, if they're stored not frozen, not in temperature, they'll go 3 or 4 years. Just make sure you shake it before use, because particularly in the Ultimate, because of that wood flour in there. That wood flour will tend to migrate up to the surface over time. You'll see that a lot when you go into the stores and you see the gallon samples. The larger the sample, the more that migration happens. And you just need to shake it up, and it's fine. So you'll see that commonly in those gallons. Number one, the stores don't turn the gallons very often, so they're typically older. Secondly, because it is a bigger sample, that migration happens faster. Yeah.
On your wood filler product in the tub,
Mm-hmm.
if it dries out, can you successfully
Recondition
re-moisten
it?
it?
Yeah, absolutely. Typical, it doesn't take a lot of water. So what I do is I'll take my hand under the faucet, and I'll get a little in my hand and just go like that into it, and then knead it in. But yeah, you can absolutely do that.
And do you make a plastic resin glue?
No, not today. Okay. Yeah, we don't today. Plastic is kind of, I talk about low surface energy, polyethylene, polypropylene. I'll throw in PTFE. Those are kind of like the holy grails of glue. Nobody really does it. It's all about surface conditioning. Like, for instance, manufacturers who are gluing those things, they're all surface conditioning the substrate so the glue's fixed. But in a DIY market, nobody has capability of doing that.
Okay, I just have a comment. I really hate the bottles. Once you opened up, then the next time you used it, next time the glue, you cannot slide the cap.
Yeah.
You cannot pull that thing up. So that's what I hate most.
Yeah. So in the U.S., everybody uses these caps, and they're basically the U.S. wood glue caps. In Europe, they use basically they're cut caps. It's just a cap, and then you cut it off, and once it's cut off, it's open. It's a give and take. We just kind of went conventional because that's what Titebond's been doing for years. It's what Elmer's is doing for years. There's no really way to fix around it because once you get glue in there, it's nearly going to dry. There are some bottles you can buy. Everybody seen the Glue Bot? Anybody have one of those? Yeah, those are kind of nice. I like them. We're looking at doing maybe a brush and nozzle, we call it, type for wood glue. That might be something that's kind of a little bit novel out in the market, kind of like selling it in the Glue Bot right away. So that's something that we're looking at.
There's a lot of information here. Do you happen to have a list of what type of glue to use with a particular project?
I wish I did.
That would be something good that you could stick at like your Home Depot or your Lowe's if you had like a...
Yeah, we tried to shop
list.
that at Home Depot and Lowe's to do like just a card they could like hang in between the glue aisle. They didn't want to do it. They wanted to do this training thing for their associates.
Do you have anything on like YouTube or something like that you could put that on? Or
We're looking at some QR codes. Does everybody know those? You take your phone, scan the barcode, and it actually tell you what that glue's for. It's just not ready yet. That's something we're looking at actually right now. Okay. But to date, on our websites, there's a little information, but probably not what you're looking for. The problem is there's so many different applications, and there's so many nuances. So even if somebody's using this application, I don't know how they prepped it, That's why, again, when I go to Home Depot and Lowe's, there's always somebody just staring bright-eyed right there, and they have no idea which one to buy. So I feel bad every time I go in there.
We have a question from
Okay.
about glue in a high temp situation,
Okay.
like a multi-wood kitchen spatula or something like that. What would you recommend?
Where it's, actually it will hit high temp?
Or that will hold up under high temp, like a kitchen, in a kitchen utensil being used.
Epoxies, methyl methacrylates, those are probably your two best ones. In the sealant realm, there's silicone types, and I don't know if everybody knows, a lot of the spatulas are made out of silicone. They're really high temperature resistance. The problem with silicones, they don't have an adhesive strength. That's why they're sealants. But as far as the adhesive realm, epoxy or methyl methacrylate would be your best bet. PVAs have some heat resistance, but not probably enough to get into a frying pan for a long period of time.
Is your whole product line available at Lowe's and Home Depot?
Pretty well. There's a few of them that aren't available, but pretty well Home Depot. Our three biggest retailers are Home Depot, Walmart, and Lowe's. Those are by far. You guys have Menards around here? Yeah. Okay, so Menards is a pretty good retailer. Ace Hardware has almost our whole line. In the retail environments, it's interesting because Menards takes everything. They by far have the biggest set of everything, including not just us, all our competitors. They usually have the biggest set of adhesives of anywhere. But Lowe's and Home Depot, yes.
A lot of us woodworkers do toys for little kids, whether they be big things or little things or even kids' furniture. Are there adhesives that you would recommend that are better for children where basically they could possibly be chewing on it?
It's probably the high glue, any of the naturals.
Okay, is the low, like a Type-On 2 or your PVC type glue okay for that?
That would probably be the next best because those are typically considered, wood glues in general are typically considered non-hazardous. If you're really getting nitpicky, then Type-On 2 or our regular wood glue would be better than the Ultimate or Type-On 3. Just because the catalyst that we use in those, it's kind of nasty. Now whether it's in the glue, it's very small amount, it's like 0.1%. But there is more technically in the Ultimate than there is our original. Or same thing with Type-On 3 versus a Type-On 2.
Thank you.
Ideally, if you use the Type 3, that would be even better yet, because there is no catalyst in there and it's basically non-toxic. But it doesn't withstand water resistance, so if they're going to be chewing on it, you kind of need some water resistance. Well, I appreciate everybody for their time. If you do have any other questions, Bill has my email address, so if you guys have any other questions, run them through Bill and send them my way. I'll respond to them.
All right.
I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Chad.
Thank you.
Thank you. Real appreciate it. See you, everybody, next month.